Hey everybody, I hope you're all excited to be back. We are back again with another episode of the Entourage podcast today with Jermaine Stegall, who has worked on a lot of great projects that you all may be familiar with. Coming to America, if you're on Netflix right now like I am and love Rebel Wilson, he also did the new film Senior Year. I'm sorry. And so many other great projects that he's here to talk about. So I'm super excited to introduce him and have him on a podcast to discuss how he plays a part in the entourage and what he does. So happy to have you stepping under the spotlight today, Jermaine. Welcome to the Entourage podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for being a part. So let's just start here. I see you in the room that I'm assuming the magic take place in. You got your keyboard right there and you're set up. So yes, introduce us to you. So for those who don't know who you are and all that you do.
My name is Jermaine Stegall. I'm a composer here in Los Angeles and originally from the Illinois area, Chicago area of Illinois.
Like I am as well.
Yeah, Chicago. Exactly. See, there you go. So, graduate school in Texas, North Texas, where I met my wife after working with her for 2 years, and then we moved to LA 2 months after being married, and we've been out here and married almost 19 years this year.
Wow, 19 years.
As we began the journey of pursuing this thing that we're talking about today somehow.
Yeah. So wait, I'm sorry, let me just go back a second. You and your wife have been married for 19 years or together for 19 years?
This year will be 19 years.
Of marriage.
July 12th. 22nd is my birthday.
The 24th is mine.
Oh, see, this is why this needed to happen.
Yes.
July, Chicago, LA. Birthday.
I'm only confused because for those who aren't looking at the podcast visually and can only hear it, y'all don't see how young he looks on the other side of this. So him telling me that he's been married for 19 years, I'm like, when, where, how?
He's shocked.
I'm very shocked.
And the funny thing is, by the way, this is for those who can't see me, this is the longest my facial hair has ever been. I normally clean shave, but for some reason I decided to do something different this year.
We're not mad at it.
This July, I'll be turning 45 this July. So
wow.
That's where we're at. That's where we're at.
Say black don't crack, so it makes sense.
You gotta hydrate.
Yes, I'm inspired.
Well,
yes. So I love
popcorn.
That.
You see this? You gotta eat popcorn. That'll help. No, I'm kidding. It's not popcorn. I don't know.
I love it.
I'm being silly.
Yes. So 19 years of marriage. I'm actually gonna shift focus just a little bit, right?
Maybe that's what it's all about.
Yes. No, that's a beautiful testament, right? To love. And we've seen people like Ryan Coogler coming out talking about his wife and the role she's played in his career. We saw Tabitha Brown talk about her relationship with her husband, and again the investment he made in his career. So and lastly, I'm gonna say we see Matthew Cherry and his beautiful work that they're doing together.
Candace, right?
Yes.
It's funny that she's actually very nice. I met them together, but I remember meeting her online through LinkedIn, and I don't know if she remembered this, but I sent her a message because I think she was at Lionsgate at the time, and I just remember her responding in a very nice way and being very considerate. And I think that I forgot that I wrote that, but when he did his book tour for Hair Love, I actually went to a book signing of his, and I was like, wait a minute, was she the really nice lady? I forgot. Like, it was just kind of funny. Like, some people are just, they're good like that, and it comes back around. They're like, good things come to them, and she was nice,
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love that. So looking at couples like that who have been working together, making amazing things happen, and making great breakthrough over the last few years. What have you and your wife been able to accomplish together, or how have you all been instrumental to each other's stories? Professionally, personally, creatively, and all of that.
Honestly, the initial, idea was that, once she finished graduate school, she went to CalArts after I did 1 year at USC, was that, her being a director, I would, as a composer, we would collaborate. We would do all these projects together, and I would be scoring her movies. And I did score the thesis film and a couple of, short films after she finished or while she was in school. But, um, it's funny, like, for the purpose of this podcast, anyone that's curious or cares to know, when it comes to, being a spouse and the idea of having family and the idea of having children specifically, because family can be you, your spouse, and a pet. It could be, a lot of things, but when it comes to children and, pandemics that randomly pop up and the fact that they need to be homeschooled and things need to happen for them, like, it becomes tricky when you got, major opportunities. Like, for me, coming to America landed just before the pandemic started. And, to finish it, I really had to remain focused on it. And honestly, it wasn't about, okay, you just take the kids. Like, I don't think that anyone really is completely off the hook because they're artists of negating all responsibility to your family. It's all I could say to everyone that I've ever, talked to about this, just to get insight from them, is that it's hard and you constantly are challenged every day. And you're constantly, it's kind of like, some perfectionists, they always feel like something could be better. I think as a parent and as a husband, you're always trying to figure out, what can I be doing more? Where can I step it up? Whatever, because my kids are involved in, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, dance classing, drum lessons, my daughter's now in gymnastics. Like, it just, the cycle goes on of things that they have after school. Even today, like, they'll be busy till like 7 or 8 p.m. And it's a school night, by the way.
Yeah.
So, it's just a constant shifting and picking up the ball where it needs to be picked up, just because it is an important thing. And honestly, you don't always see the fruit right away, but it's there, when you invest in them and when you don't ignore the things that we know, you and I know are important.
Yeah. How do you all navigate that together? Both being dreamers, both being creatives, but still having those responsibilities, like you said, especially at such a time when we weren't expecting our lives to just shift like that. And so things like childcare and school wasn't as accessible, which kind of left you all having to pick and choose and really having to make those decisions to another degree, as if it wasn't already enough being two creatives, now being two creatives with a family.
Yeah, honestly, she has done, well, I say significantly less, like 98 to 99, she might say 110% less creative stuff in terms of output for herself. Because we had this idea years ago that, I like commercial art. And that's part of what, for me, led to the conversation of coming to America, because I didn't think that I was the next logical choice because that job or even be up for it. But I was talking to, Paramount about the fact that I love big movies and I love larger than life stuff. And so it was like, oh, it kind of became a, oh, really? Oh, we got Coming to America. Try that, see what happens. Worked out. But, a lot of my wife's creative outlets have really been having to do with coming up with ways to teach our kids and continue coming up with ways to keep their childhood colorful, whether it be birthdays, Christmas, holidays, all these things continue to roll around the calendar year after year after year. And it's like, how do we continue to make that special? That I feel like, I don't think that she chose it, but it became places that she poured creative energy into. Or for me, it honestly became these scores that were assignments. That I'm happy to pour. I'm blessed that it's work, but at the same time, it's also an opportunity to kind of escape from our pandemic reality.
Yeah. And speaking of the pandemic, this opportunity, like you said, the opportunity for Coming to America in particular, came right before the pandemic. And it shifted all of us, unexpectedly. One, how much more challenging was it for you to do this project opposed to past projects, considering one, you're now jumping into a bigger, space than maybe you've inhabited before with being given this task, but also now again, we're in unprecedented times where the way you connect to your fellow musicians and the people you contract with is different.
Absolutely.
So how did you navigate
I mean, there's several things. The first thing was one of the most exciting parts. I don't know what the most exciting part is. Every day I woke up for a year and a half. It's just exciting to think that I was still on this movie. But one of the most exciting things was being on set, off and on for almost 3 weeks in Atlanta while they were shooting a lot of these musical numbers that had to happen. I had to supervise them. Being on set and seeing sometimes 200 and 300 extras standing around, it's not something that you can normally, you could do. Basically when 2020 rolled around, anything that was being shot, they didn't have these giant sets where everyone's just standing there with their mask off and you walk around and talk to the actors, and Morgan Freeman's setting up over here and I'll walk up to him and just, without asking anyone permission, just tell him that I'm writing music for him in this scene specifically, just sharing these moments. That's kind of a dream. You have all these just, cameo actors all over. That was the biggest thing that I think is different for a lot of people, that you can just interact with people in a way without worrying about health. But then also, and like you said, when it comes to musicians, when it came time to start recording, because we had 2 choir sessions before actually they started editing the movie in 2019. When it came time to record the following fall of 2020, I was told that all woodwinds had to record at home, and all vocals that remained, they had to record separately at home. And of course, the idea was that I would record a choir. And so it really became about a more intimate score, where I think we had 5 vocalists recording at home, 5 or 8, I can't remember what it was, something like that, but they were at home, individual, and also required to have a home setup of some sort. And we had to have, Zoom calls with the engineer to figure out what kind of mics they were using, or how close are you, and all that, changed a lot of that. Our percussion had to be recorded remotely. I was going to do that with the orchestra in the same room at Fox. Our strings had to be recorded on a separate day than our brass. So that it presented some technical challenges, but as far as the pandemic is concerned and your question, it honestly gave me more time to just think very deliberately about every move that I was making. So it wasn't like all these things happening at once and people asking questions. Everybody was juggling fires because of the pandemic. So no one was really worried about me. The music just kept flowing in and trickling in. And, I had plenty of time. And honestly, the release date, no one knew it was going to happen. It was supposed to be Christmas 2020. So that just kind of stayed in the air and, floated around as we don't know what's going to happen. We just kept finishing and fine tuning, and that, it was kind of we just kind of used that,
Yeah. It came together, as people of color, I'll say we are used to having to overcome the odds. We're used to having the odds stacked against us, so for some, the pandemic was something new, something they hadn't experienced, but with some of us, it's like, oh, well, we're used to having to figure it out, So how did just your life experiences, being a man of color, whether it just be in life in general or in this industry, and the fact that we're, again, so often having to arise to the occasion, and as we hear, we're 10 times as hard to get half as far, and things like that. How has your life experiences prepared you for the challenges that presented themselves with this project?
I mean, honestly, the fact that I think when it comes to, I'm trying to think, when it comes to being Black, like it really, that honestly was a conversation starter, because I didn't think that me, in terms of my credit, was making me a natural choice for this project. I felt like there's probably 10 to 20 people, Black or white, that would have been ahead of me to do this. But honestly, I will say, to the director's credit, he brought up to the head of music. He said, when we start talking about music, I don't know who you got in mind, but it wouldn't hurt if they're Black. That was one of the first things he said. And by the way, I didn't find that out until maybe 8 months after I was working on the project. You know, like later down the line, kind of like, how did I, you know, because Craig Brewer, the director, he had worked with his composer Scott Bomar, who was from Memphis as well as he is, many times before, and it was basically his guy. I mean, he's white, but I don't think that, you know, it was completely about, you know, his skin tone. I think it had to do with like the diversity of what he was gonna bring to the table in terms of music. Like my, you know, influences with gospel or orchestral music. These are things that the actual story needed. On top of the fact that I was someone that could do basically all the different styles, whether it been, you know, we talked about jazz at one point, but the African thing, the gospel stuff, the orchestral stuff, the chamber music for the ensembles that you saw on stage. My personal experiences allowed me to be the one basically doing it all, which also became a talking point for it's kind of a no-brainer. He's literally pulling off everything we're asking him to. And also, when one writes music for movies like this, you need to be able to, in a studio like this, create what's called a mock-up, which is a demonstration of what the music's gonna sound like once it's replaced with live instruments or whatever. And of course, this is all stuff that needs to be synced to picture. As they're changing picture, you know, sometimes picture changes, you know, 2 or 3 times a week, maybe once or twice a day even. And the music for the score, it needs to stay in sync. So you're constantly conforming what you wrote to the picture. So the fact that I was able to do all these things, and have very specific people in mind that I wanted to use that were going to bring something unique to the score. To answer your question, that was part of what was the selling point. It wasn't a selling point. I wasn't begging them. They were just kind of like, where does this guy come from?
Wow. So can we even speak to that? Because a lot of times, you know, we're taught to grind and look for opportunities, but then you have those times when opportunities come and you're not ready because you're not well-rounded enough or diverse enough, etc. And not diverse as in skin tone and race, but diverse as in skill and experience, right? So for you, where did that come from? What did that well-roundedness? How were you prepared? Like, did your parents have you in music school early on? Were you just always hungry? Like, how did you prepare before the opportunity even presented itself?
I mean, you kind of have to. I think that's why people, when you see like someone like, you know, the Kobe's of the world or the Dave Chappelle's or whoever, Mike Tyson's talking about finding something that you're passionate about. I finally figured out about 2 or 3 years ago, actually 2019, I wrote a piece for my high school band, and I was talking, you know, I flew back and conducted it after having gone there years ago. I graduated as senior in 1995. I was talking to them about the fact that when I was in high school, we didn't realize it, but our band director, he'd pull out some of the same pieces every couple of years, because I think he discovered that in a place like Joliet, Illinois, where not a ton of celebrities come out, there's not a lot, you know, a way to boost morale about being able to master something is to understand that outside of music, if you can figure out something that you're passionate about, something that you're great at, you know, it could become a career. It doesn't have to, but the point of that whole thing is that music can translate, you know, or mastery can translate through any career. So the passion for me, once I discovered that that's the passion really has to do with music and also was coinciding with movies, I just kind of let it fuel. It wasn't like my parents forced me to do anything. They kind of allowed me to try things, which this is why our kids are in dance and gymnastics, blah, 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 blah. Is so when they figure out what their passion is, the earlier they figure it out, they can go down that rabbit hole of how far do you want to go with it for themselves, you know?
Yeah. I love that. And I think, again, that speaks to good parenting, to even start early enough to then do that work early enough so they're not spending their whole lives looking for that, you know? So, I think that speaks volumes to you all. I want to ask this. As far as, you know, it comes, Coming to America, huge project. So many legends on that, you know, a remake. Yes. But that, you know, that's something, like you said, was fitting with you being African American. They wanted to find someone African American. This last project, senior year, is not an African American project. It's a mainstream project that's I'm still in the beginning of it, but it's not a black
really?
piece. Yes, I've been trying to. I love Rebel Wilson, so I've been watching it.
Oh yeah, she's great, and I think she was one of the driving forces behind how much love and colorfulness and heart behind the whole thing was. I only met her at the actual premiere, but she was one of the producers. And, the director, it's funny, like this movie, is pretty much easily the most inclusive movie that I've ever worked on in terms of the story. The high school that is in the story was modeled at the director's high school, which he said when he was in high school, it all had to do with inclusion, everything about it. So you're going to get messages of inclusion throughout the whole story. Whether it be gender, orientation, whatever. And then, I noticed this, when our main Black love interest, our main love interest is Black, basically, is like a guy that was her friend, not to give anything away, but in high school, when she wakes up 20 years later, he becomes the romantic interest, and to see them, like how full circle the level of inclusion is. And then even to have a Black composer who, like, the score needed to sound anything but Black. Like my initial pitch to him and the studio was to have this high energy rock score that was kind of like a throwback to 20 years ago. Now that's the pitch. The next question is, can you pull it off? What are your demos sounding like? And so, like, really it has to do with my interest. My younger brother, who will be 40 next year, he had this huge interest in playing hockey. So he's lived in Canada, he's gone to Boston, he's done all this stuff. He loves rock music, he loves country music. So it's just like an interest of his. Like, so for me, to get an opportunity to express this side of myself, like I love, romantic comedies. I mean, you probably never guess what my favorite movie of all time is. I have a feeling there's no way you would guess.
What is it? Now I want to know.
So I'll just tell you, The Wizard of Oz, and for a plethora of its own reasons. Like, I mean, it always surprises people. Now I think more and more, the older I get, people go, "Wow!" Like, almost like people forgot about the movie. But I'm like, isn't it everybody's? I guess not. But it's one of those things that you give a person an opportunity to speak their voice, and you never know. Like, there's a lot of I think people forget that across the different cultures, everybody has these little traits that are universal. It's not just about, what you grew up with, and whatnot,
Yeah, 100%. I've been talking about this lately. I have a client whose game, I'm gonna actually make sure I get you a copy of it, but it's called Like You. And it's a card game. It's called Like You cards. I do have some. So I just want you to see the box or the design.
Okay.
This is the game, Like You.
Okay, Like You.
It's aimed at combating cancel culture and really celebrate what we have in common versus what we, what differentiates us. And we went on a game show, an actual professional game show that had nothing to do with this card game. We was doing another game show. And the host said, "Oh, so you all," because they're Black, the creators are Black. And they said, "Oh, you all created a game for Black people." And we're like, "No, just created a game. We just happen to be Black."
Right, exactly.
Yes. Exactly. So I say that to ask you this. A lot of times, again, because that isn't necessarily a Black film, they wouldn't traditionally think of a Black, composer to do that. But Viola Davis' book really talks about Juilliard, really kind of stripping you of your color, and in order for Blacks to be considered well-rounded, they had to learn to be white. Whereas whites aren't asked to learn Black dialect, to learn to talk Jamaican or any of that, to be considered well-rounded. They just get to be themselves. So for you, what did this moment mean for you to be able to come into a world that wasn't necessarily your world or your culture and still be able to do the task, not because you were a Black man, but just because you were a talented composer and your color shouldn't matter regardless?
Well, the funny thing is, like, my high school experience, and the reason I think I was able to adapt so well is it kind of looked like this movie. Like, it was everything. Like, Black, white, Hispanic, and that the area that I grew up in, it still looks like that. So honestly, when I went to college, at a college that, isn't like one that people tend to mention as their first choice, Northern Illinois University.
Okay,
It
my
was
best
a
friend went there.
it was similarly a reflection of the same thing. It was like every walk of life, every walk of the rainbow, which to me is like that's actually how the world is. It's not
Yes.
just your neighborhood. And by the way, now that you mentioned that, my neighborhood, same thing. White, Hispanic, Black,
Mm-hmm.
all in one neighborhood. Like
Yeah.
it was just our demographic, just where we were. So like, coming to American senior year are two of the first majorly released studio films at from Paramount, um, or from anywhere that I've done, that people can find them. But I've done 22, 23 plus features before that, similarly with all kinds of diverse topics, subjects, sci-fi, horror,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, movies, projects that don't necessarily have to do with my family's upbringing. So it really had to do with, like you said, just being allowed to just be a composer and not one that was, what is the Black sound? No one ever asked me that on Coming to America. It's like,
Yeah.
score the scene. Even same thing. Senior year was like, okay, so most of the people in this movie are white. The high school is white. Lots of white girl problems. What's your take on that? It was just kind of like score the scene. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It is just like it spoke to me.
Yeah. I love that. And I'm excited to see what you have in store, what's
Mm.
next. I know you've already done, what's the number of films you've already worked on? And TV shows,
I
it's like
mean,
50
I
projects or
mean,
something, right?
yeah, it's like 50 projects total, and I said 20 something feature films. I mean, it's more than 50 projects. I mean, I've
Yeah.
done music for alongside other composers, where I was writing additional music for the score, where I wasn't the
Hmm.
lead composer, and
Yeah.
that the diversity on that, like it's I've always wanted to be someone that does not just niche films. I like I like films that speak directly to Black
Hmm.
culture, but then also directly to the world.
Yeah.
Like the whole world.
Yeah.
And even my agents know this. Like one of the things that I'm will be continuing to work toward is that with every project, not just that everything is different, but that there's no oh, he can't do that. Because
Yeah.
everything that I do, like some of the things I'm up for now, are going to be such a 180 from everything that I've recently done. I did a horror film for Universal that I'm not sure when it's going to be released. It's called Oracle,
Hmm.
for Will Packer Productions,
Yeah.
which we love Will Packer.
Yes.
Possibly this year. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but it's that's an exciting one because it has so little to do with anything that you might have heard so far. Like
Yeah.
the music is going to be so different.
Mm.
Um, and I worked on for like 6 months just creating sounds before I even
Yeah.
started writing the score. So,
I love that. I'm excited to see that and
uh,
see what you've done with it. I know we have less than a minute left before
mm-hmm.
Zoom kicks us out of here. But before you go, for young musicians who think music is just a hobby and don't realize that they can, make a career out of it someday, very much like you have, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I mean, I would advise people to check out, all the various aspects of, you know, music, whether it be, in film and television, sound. I mean, there's all kinds of things. I know a lot of people that end up becoming music editors, conductors, orchestrators. There's a lot of different jobs that have to do with music in the film and TV world outside of that, as well as when you think about the pop world or engineering, producing, mixing, mastering. These are all jobs that exist out there. And honestly, we talk about awareness in this group that I'm a member of, which is the Composer Diversity Collective, which is really it's founded by Michael Abels, the composer of Get Out, Us, and this summer's Nope from Jordan Peele. Is one of the lead founders who basically the point of the group is awareness of the job, and also aware that composers of color from all walks of life are can be found in one place. There should be no excuse at this point to say, I don't know any Black or Asian island, Pacific, composer or Indian American composers. Like there's a place where the notoriety of the working composer that actually have credits, as well as places to get jobs. Even Craig Brewer, director of Coming to America, said that John Singleton, his mentor, told him the way that Black people get hired a lot of the time is you just have to hire them. We hire each other. We have to look for each other. You want people that are qualified, but awareness is a big thing. So
yeah,
I would say for people to look out for all the different kinds of jobs. It's not just about being a composer or the producer or the singer, the person that you see on the actual their name. Sometimes there's a lot of jobs where are very satisfying for people that to be a part of the process.
Yeah. We'll definitely have to have you back for a part 2 to get a little more in depth about your own personal career, the things you've had to overcome, and some of the things you have that have challenged you, but have also sharpened you at the same time. I'd love to dig further into that in a part 2. But we thank you for giving us your time today. I'm excited for those who are going to be blessed by the part of your story that you shared. And just we wishing you and your wife a lot of success and congrats on making it 119 years and then being able to do so successfully as creatives who have your own desires and being able to support each other while still raising a family and doing it well. I mean, again, a lot hats off to that. I know you wear many hats, but I know that's an important one. So yes, congrats for sure.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you again for sharing your story with us, and we look forward to sharing your story with our audience at the Entourage.
Well, thanks for having me.
No problem.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. As always, you can like, share, comment, subscribe, rate, do all of those things. We would love to hear from you and to hear your feedback. Go ahead and join us on Instagram at The Entourage Podcast, as well as like our Facebook page, The Entourage Podcast. Also, visit our website, theentouragepodcast.com. Sign up to get our emails, and we will see you all next time under the spotlight.